Welcome back to another episode of the Substantiate podcast, where every week I discuss a new hypothetical matchup with a guest. In this week's episode, this is part 1 of 2 of CEOs and entrepreneurs playing 6v6 flag football, and today I'm joined by Corey Lieblein, who you'll hear from in just one moment. But before we start this episode, make sure to follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at substantiatepod. Check out our website, www.substantiatepod.com. And now let's get into this week's episode. Substantiate, to establish by proof or competent evidence. Today, I'm joined by Corey Lieblein. So how are you today, Corey?
Good, Will. How are you?
Good. Is there anything you would like to tell the listeners about yourself before we continue into this episode?
Well, in addition to being my biggest accomplishment is being Will's cousin. That's number one. Number two, I spent the last 20 years building a consumer electronics company, starting at zero, built it to over $100 million. And what we became known for was we sold more record players than anyone else in the entire world. We would sell over 4 million record players a year. And through the 20 years of my career, it was really an incredible grind, an incredible story of just tenacity and innovation to build this company from zero to $100 million. Back in 2016, I sold 75% of my company to private equity, stayed on for 3 years as CEO. And on January 1st of this year, I stepped down as CEO of Innovative Technology, and I started a private equity firm called CP8 Capital.
Nice. And so what is your experience as an entrepreneur and CEO taught you about the position, or what qualities make a good leader in that position?
Well, being an entrepreneur means being willing to do everything, especially like me. I started my company at zero. So it's not like I came into a company that was doing $200, $300, $400 million a year. So for me, my responsibilities as CEO on day one were a little bit different than they were when I left back in January. As CEO and founder, it was me willing to do everything. I did the buying, the selling, the bookkeeping, the logistics, the operations, you name it. I did it. But really, to me, being CEO was about having the vision of how to grow the business. From the beginning, it was how do I take it from 0 to 5 million? And then from 5 million to 10 million, 10 to 20 million, 20 to 30 million. And as you grow, Will, and your company grows, the direction has to change in order to keep taking it to the next level and the next level. So I just never stopped working. And I always said to myself, think harder, think faster, work harder, work faster than anybody else out there, and never give up. But the biggest change for me is when we hit 50, 60, 70 million dollars in annual sales, was hiring incredible people to do what they do very, very well, whether it be a CFO, a vice president of sales, my director of e-commerce. Hire incredible people to do what they do. And as a CEO, I became the visionary of, okay, what will our company do next to lead to the next sales growth period?
So today we're the ones hiring the other people to be on our football teams. How are all the qualities of these leaders going to contribute to playing football? And especially because many of these, just looking at the list, many, if not all of these CEOs and entrepreneurs were of big companies that started from the ground up. We got Phil Knight from Nike, Steve Jobs in Apple, etc. So how are these qualities going to look in a football scenario?
So I think they're all going to be incredible playing 6-on-6 football, because Football, like business, in my opinion, is about talent, but it's also about grit, determination, and it's also about creativity. Being a great football player does not mean running straight down the field. You look at the best football players, you look at running backs like Saquon Barkley, he's spinning, he's cutting, he's leaping over people. So the reasons why we chose a lot of these entrepreneurs to be part of the game is because they demonstrate, in my opinion, the same, or not the same, but very similar qualities to football players, to great football players.
I agree. And because most of these people worked their way up, starting from nothing in their industries, they know how to be resilient and that stuff. We have a list today of entrepreneurs and CEOs. There are 16 people on our list. They consist of people that are currently still alive, still active, CEOs. Some of them are from 100 years ago, such as Henry Ford. Some of them are still some of the biggest names you hear today, Mark Cuban and Warren Buffett, and some of them are just other CEOs that we decided to put on this list. So because of the last two episodes where me and my guest, we drafted teams, and I won the coin flip both of those times. So to make up for it, Corey, you got the first pick today. Who's it going to be?
Okay. For my first pick was very simple. In my opinion, this entrepreneur changed the world prior to technology, prior to social media, had incredible vision, grit, and determination, and built the biggest retailer in the world. So I took Sam Walton, founder of Walmart.
All right. So with that pick, what specifically has he done with Walmart that makes him unique?
So I'll tell you a little story about Sam Walton. When I was a sophomore in college at Syracuse University, I was a retail and marketing major, and Sam Walton actually did a video conference with our school, and I was selected to ask him a certain question. And I said, Mr. Walton, he said, son, call me Sam. And I said, Sam, why did you decide to go into value-priced retail versus high-end expensive retail? And he said in his Arkansas accent, son, I wanted to clothe the asses of the masses. And the reason why I chose him is very, very simple, and how it applies to football is he had this idea to not just build, and I don't know if you know this, Will, not just build a discount retailer, but what his vision was setting up a distribution network around the country that allowed him to get his products to his stores cheaper than his competitors, and then therefore pass the savings along to his customers. So, and I have pictures of his very first Sam Walton 5 and Dime. I took a picture of in Bentonville, Arkansas, that I used to travel to personally when I used to sell products to them.
And you can check our social medias to find that picture.
And so I chose him because not only did he have an idea, but he executed it. And then when he executed it, he didn't stop with his original idea. He kept building, come up with new ideas to accelerate it. And like a game of football, like we talked about before, football players just don't run down the middle. Football players have to learn, if there is a defender coming on the right, I better cut to the left. Because of Sam's, and this will be a recurring theme, I think, of his grit, determination, vision, and just his will to get it done, that's why he was an absolute easy number one choice for me.
Good pick. Sam Walton is 5'10" and 165 pounds. So where do you think you could see him playing on this 6v6 football field?
Sure, at 5'10", 165. Now, don't forget, 5'10" when Sam Walton was alive is the equivalent of like 6'4" today. People are stronger and bigger and faster now. I would put him at a great wide receiver, but I'm going to reserve the right to position him on the football field
of
until I
course.
see the rest of my roster.
Of course. So with my first pick, I'm going to select Elon Musk. He is maybe one of the craziest CEOs in the sense that he literally named his son that, like, whatever crazy name with like that AE character in it and stuff. But he's someone on my team that I just want him to be electric. I want him to be giving it his all. He's going to run the offense and the defense. Elon Musk is probably most famous for running Tesla and SpaceX. He's running multiple things at once. He's doing a great job with them. He's making them popular. He's doing everything he can with them, and I think he is going to be someone that's kind of the mind of my team. For you with Sam Walton, it sounded like you may have him in some sort of scenario where he's drawing up plays for you and he's running them in the most efficient way possible. And I'm sitting here with Elon Musk and I want to run them the most electric way possible.
Okay, good pick, good pick. My second pick is easy. I came from the world of consumer electronics where I sold record players and audio systems. My second pick, very simply, is Steve Jobs. I'm writing this down. So Steve Jobs, let's talk about him. The marketing genius of the 20th and 21st century, bar none, has impacted pretty much all of our lives forever. And the reason why, forget about the fact that, he was simply a guy, from what I've seen and what I've read, and I've read his books. The reason why I love him on a football field, he would simply chew your ears and your nose off to get to the end zone, no matter what. So Steve Jobs, I am 100% putting at running back because I don't care if we're playing flag football. I don't care if we're playing tackle football on our 6v6. He will get that ball and he will run right through you because all he sees is the end zone. So he is by far my second pick. Easy second pick.
Now, you said that you think he'll most likely be your running back. And in a flag football scenario, one of the most important things is to be able to be really agile so that you can kind of control where your flags are in relation to the defense's hands. So Steve Jobs is 6 foot, or was 6'2", 154 pounds. So what kind of agility are we looking at with him that's going to control his body on the football field?
So let's start with the first one. Steve Jobs, when you go to reach for his flag, will simply chop your arm off so you can't grab the flag. Let's start with that, right? We all read about Steve Jobs and how ruthless he was. But the one thing I really want you to remember about Steve Jobs was what a creative genius he was, not only on the marketing side, but on the product side. Steve Jobs, most notably, of course, brought us the iPod. Then he brought us the iPhone. Then brought us the iPad. 3 things. Now, people don't use iPhones anymore. So talking about how he's going to be agile. Now, the great thing about Steve Jobs, like every great entrepreneur, Steve Jobs has 100% failed before. If you look at the Lisa computer, right? Epic failure. So Steve Jobs realized how he had to maneuver his body when it comes to flag football, how he had to maneuver his career in order to stay agile so people could not grab his flag every single time. And that's why I love him, for those 2 reasons. on the flag football field.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely an interesting answer, kind of turning the question around, chop off his arm instead.
That's right. As an entrepreneur, that's what we do, by the way. We give creative answers.
All right. With my second pick, I'm going to select Phil Knight because he started Nike. He built his business on sports. Maybe he can supply the team with equipment. Maybe he can play hard. He's 5'9", 180, and I could see him in my running back position, just kind of plowing through with a bit of the extra weight, but still short. Again, just like you were saying with why you selected Steve Jobs as a running back, Steve Jobs is a few inches taller, but Phil Knight he's a running back runs, and Phil Knight built Nike. Nike makes shoes. You run in shoes.
Okay, I love it. I love it. I love it. Listen, there's nobody better than Phil Knight. And separately, I hope you read his book called Shoe Dog. If you haven't read his book called Shoe Dog, it's probably one of the most incredible books I've ever read about a true entrepreneur. So I suggested everybody listening to this podcast reads the book called Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Yep. All right. So on to your third pick, 3 out of 6.
Okay, I'm gonna go right to my quarterback here. Starting quarterback for Team Corey Lieblein is the richest man on planet Earth, Jeff Bezos. Now, so far, you're going to realize for me, it's a common theme. The common theme around my picks, what do you think they are?
I guess people that kind of reinvented their space.
Yes, reinvented their space, but people that also affected the industry of which I worked in for the last 20 years. So 20, what's really amazing about Jeff Bezos is, again, 20 some odd years ago, if someone says, oh, I met this guy, Jeff Bezos, people would say, who? And he went from obscurity to the richest man in the world in basically 2 decades. Really, truly, truly amazing. And the reason why I love Jeff Bezos as my quarterback and as a player in general is because he took something and he just completely changed the way the world worked. Now, what I also love about him is he started off selling books. Amazon sold books. That's all they sold. He had warehouses, and he had a warehouse full of books. And he realized, though, that there was a better way of doing something. Instead of going to your local Barnes and Noble to buy a book, or your local bookstore on Main Street, USA, he was going to sell it online. But what he really created was an entirely different way for the American and the world to shop. And what I also love about him is when he saw somebody rushing him as the quarterback, he just didn't stand there. He realized, he moved left, he moved right, he stepped up in the pocket, and he started adding in non-book products. And then, of course, he starts to build that, and Amazon becomes the new norm, the new normal way to shop. And it's a way, by the way, he's changed the way we all live our life. There are very few of us left in the world that only go to brick and mortar retail stores. So it changed the way the world lives. And then again, he doesn't stop there. He develops AWS, Amazon Web Services, right? And, so he's always looking forward, and he is a true world changer. And how it applies to a game of football is, I think that he sees the field. And when I say sees the field, I don't mean it in a literal sense. It's a figurative term. He sees everything going around him. He sees what's happening before it's happening. And in terms of being a quarterback, that's an incredible asset to have.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned how Amazon started with just books, and eventually they really almost ran Barnes and Nobles out of business, several stores closing across the country. And then I've also seen Amazon bookstores, though, in malls. It's just a bookstore, it's an Amazon bookstore. They've got Kindles, but they also have regular books. And he sort of came back to that original idea and goal. And in football, if the original idea or goal is to score, he may do some other fancy stuff along the way, but he's coming back to that original goal.
I agree. I agree. Who's your third pick?
With my third pick, continuing on with the kind of sports related or just high energy, I'm going to select Mark Cuban. He's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, an NBA basketball team. He's an investor on Shark Tank and entrepreneur, and he's a large part of his life and a large part of his business life is centered around sports. And just like Phil Knight, I think he's going to bring a level of experience to my team that will be different from the experience of all the other players. As someone that's directly in the sports industry, he knows the behind the scenes. He knows how to get to the field because there's a long process to get there. There's everything that goes on before. And with Mark Cuban on my team, I hope that he'll be able to kind of keep everyone else together, see the bigger picture, see what's going on, see how to use the assets that my team has to make his way to the end zone. And I think he'll be a strong player on my team as a quarterback.
Okay, I like the selection. I like the selection. All right, my fourth pick is an entrepreneur that was tough. He was disciplined. He never took no for an answer. And if you said no to him, he would simply run you over like a Mack truck running over a trash can in the middle of the road. He would just flatten it. And that's Ray Kroc from McDonald's. I chose Ray Kroc. As we talked about, he would flatten you like a Mack truck. As we know about the story about Ray Kroc, he is the founder of McDonald's. And Ray Kroc was a salesman selling milkshake mixers back, 60, 70, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And he stumbled across this idea, and he was like a tornado. He knew he was going to do it, and he went ahead and did it. And the reason why he was so amazing was Ray Kroc, like every other great entrepreneur, he did not succeed right away. And the way he made an incredible amount of money was he had all of these franchises, but he wasn't making any money. And he realized that if he owned the real estate of which the McDonald's were built on, then he would be able to control his franchisees. And so Ray Kroc, he was a tough guy. He had these small town partners who actually created McDonald's from the Midwest. And he was a bulldozer, and he just never took no for an answer, and he built an incredible empire. And for that reason, I'm going to make Ray Kroc one of my blockers. And on the defensive side of the ball, he will be a huge, huge tackler for me. Anybody trying to get to my quarterback, Jeff Bezos, you are not getting through Ray Kroc. He's going to provide all of the protection that you would ever need, or that Jeff Bezos and the rest of my team will ever need. on the team.
Yeah, and so if he's one of your blockers, he is 5'5". He's 159 pounds. So I agree that he'll be strong, but how is he going to be able to block the opponents? And not just in an entrepreneurial way, but like in the physical setting.
Okay. So I love the question. And let me try to come up with an analogy. In a blocker, okay, you need a guy or a player, because it's not, of course, male specific. You need a player who's willing to put their nose in the other person's face, put their shoulders in their chest, and never stop driving their legs. That's what makes an incredible blocker. Ray Kroc, excuse me. Ray Kroc is somebody who'll drive his legs until they fall off. He doesn't matter. He doesn't care if he comes out all bloodied, because I'm assuming we're playing 6-on-6 with no helmets and no pads. He
Yep.
doesn't care if he knocks his head into yours and he's bleeding. His legs are never, ever, ever going to stop. And his sheer will and determination and his drive will stop you from ever getting to his quarterback.
Yep. I like that answer.
I'm glad you like the answer.
All right. So with my fourth pick this time, I'm going to take Walt Disney. Similar to Elon Musk in the sense that Walt Disney was just a fun guy. He created Disney, which is again one of the world's biggest companies. They hosted the NBA bubble in Disney World in Florida. They have famously, you have to walk through the gift shop while exiting a ride. He knows how to get the business done while also being a fun guy, obviously creating Disney. That's Mickey Mouse, all the Disney princesses, all the Pixar stuff, some of which indirectly, but very directly because he started the freaking company.
That's right.
But so hopefully he'll be able to work with Elon Musk and not have too big egos and be able to add some fun to this team, be able to add some uniqueness to this team, a team that everyone wants to tune in on Sunday afternoon and watch, a team that is a fan favorite. And I think that Walt Disney will be a big factor in completing that for my team.
Okay. I absolutely love it. The one thing I'm looking up really quickly, if you could tell me this, what was the height and weight of Henry Ford?
Henry Ford was 5'10", 154 pounds.
Okay. My next pick is Henry Ford. Henry Ford changed again. I am all about civilization changers. And I think you're going to realize that. And like a lot of your entrepreneurs or some of your entrepreneurs, Henry Ford changed the way we got from point A to point B. Like on the football field, you have to be a driving force. No pun intended. He was a driving force. As we all know, Henry Ford was the first person to automate the production of automobiles and vehicles. And I'm going to make him my wide receiver as my second wide receiver. Again, the guy was just an absolute titan of industry. He was a visionary. And what I think you can tell by my roster so far between Sam Walton, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Ray Kroc, Henry Ford, these are all tough people. These are all people who had ideas and visions and had the wherewithal to go ahead and do it in an environment where it didn't exist. And they were completely brand new. The story of Henry Ford is fantastic. A lot of adversity. And so for me, again, I love him as my other wide receiver.
Yeah, and similar to your first pick, Sam Walton, Henry Ford, he made the process of building a car much more efficient by basically inventing assembly lines. And Sam Walton made his company, Walmart, they ran much more, or they shipped products much more efficiently and cheaper. And I'm seeing a similarity between those two players.
Yep, I love it.
All right, with my fifth pick, I am going to select Mark Zuckerberg, 5'7", 154 pounds. Continuing on with my theme of just being a little more of a fun team than downright intense, like Corey's team. Mark Zuckerberg, he created Facebook, which then continued to buy and create other platforms such as Instagram. And he created one of the most influential parts in millions, if not billions, of people's lives. Social media. He basically invented social media.
Absolutely created social media. He was there were people before him like MySpace, but he was the grandfather of social media. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things on social media varying from all different categories. But specifically for football, if he kind of encompasses or creates all of those categories, if he creates opportunities for his other teammates, if he kind of locks down on defense, if he solidifies his position, then I see him fitting in very well with my team.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So my last pick, it's actually on our list. We had Larry Page and Sergey Brin. So we're gonna call them Sergey Page. We're gonna make them one person if that's okay with you.
Okay,
I'm
they
actually
can
gonna
sub in
select.
and out.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're the Google boys.
Yep.
And the reason why I love them is again, like all of my picks and all of your picks is, there were search engines before. There were search engines before Google, of course. But what's really incredible about them is that, and very similar to my career, of course, I had competitors who have been in my space for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, is that you don't have to be, it's okay not to be first, but simply to do things better. And the reason why I love Larry Page and Sergey Brin is because we can use their algorithm to find the very, very, very best plays to call into the game. So I'm going to make
You could say
them
the same about Amazon Web Services.
You absolutely can. But I'm going to put them as my little sneaky little tight ends, having these great innovative ways to run these underneath patterns, right? These little 5-yard button hooks, the quick 5-yard slants that tight ends run so well, the block, and first they block, then they go into coverage, then they go into into pattern. So I'm going with the Google boys as my sixth and final pick.
And so in terms of height and weight, they are almost exactly the same. Sergey Brin is 5'8", 165, and Larry Page is 5'7", 163. So
Okay.
maybe we can just sum them up into one person.
We're going to call them Sergey Page. How about that?
Yep, Sergey Page.
Sergey Page it is.
Yep. And so a bit shorter tight ends, but they're definitely built. They're definitely solid. They'll definitely be able to get the 5-yard slant. They'll definitely be able to block. And although they don't necessarily meet the average physical requirements for a tight end, they definitely meet the other criteria of that position.
And with all due fairness, there aren't a lot of entrepreneurs who fit the tight end's physical prototype, which is 6'2", 235 pounds, and runs a 4.7 40.
Exactly.
Right.
There's few people in the world that fit that.
That's right. That's right.
And 99% of them are in the NFL or college playing tight end.
That's right. Who's your last pick?
All right. With my last pick, I'm going to obviously select someone that kind of completes my team, that completes the theme of my team. So I have Elon Musk, Walt Disney, and Mark Zuckerberg, who they're supposed to be the fun guys that make it interesting to watch. And then there's Mark Cuban, who knows the industry, and Phil Knight, who, again, in different ways, knows parts of the industry. And someone that I'm looking for right now is someone that those people can take advantage of in this situation. So I'm going with the most athletic option here. And with this, I'm going to select Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. He's 6'2", 187 pounds. And I think that he'll be going up against one of his predecessors, Steve Jobs, in the same company. And Tim Cook he'll play hard against him. He'll try to prove himself on the field. He's again the CEO of Apple, which, as you mentioned with Steve Jobs, everything that Steve Jobs created, and basically now Tim Cook kind of controls that. And so they're a little bit similar in the sense of how they operate a little bit. I mean, Tim Cook didn't have to build the company from scratch. But because of that, if the other players on my team are the ones that are doing that work, then he's just out there to win. He's out there to grow the team, grow the score. He's going to score us points. He's 6'2", 187 pounds. There aren't many people on this list that have the physique of a tight end. But out of any of them, I'd say Tim Cook is probably the best example. And I think that bit of athleticism over a lot of your players, Corey, is going to finish up my team and drive them to win this game.
Well, I disagree with you emphatically that your team will lose by 21 points. Vegas already has me as a 21-point favorite, but we'll see next weekend when we actually conduct the game.
Yep. And so you're listening to this episode, or at least it is released on Wednesday, October 21st. And next week on the 28th, come back again. And Corey and I are going to be walking through a few in-game scenarios. We're going to talk about how we think each of our teams will win. And we are going to complete the second part of this episode of CEOs and entrepreneurs playing 6v6 flag football on the Substantiate podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening to this episode. And you can also follow or subscribe depending on the platform you're listening on. And if you have any feedback for this episode, please send an email to substantiatepod@gmail.com and check out all of our social media pages at substantiatepod on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number one, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number one way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at SubstantiatePod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.